Greetings, friends. Welcome to the What's Right show. Sam Mirejovsky here, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian. Happy Thursday, April 3rd. I will get to this a little bit later in the program. We absolutely are going to be talking about this hornet's nest that I poked with my call to bring back Hey Reb here in Las Vegas at UNLV. I didn't realize this was going to be such a controversial thing. Yesterday, talking about universities gone wild and Trump's efforts to defund some of these universities who are obviously creating, or hotbeds, let's say, of American extremism. I mentioned this Hey Reb thing and that we got rid of the beloved mascot here in Southern Nevada, the Runnin' Rebels at UNLV. And, I'll get to that probably next hour. But first, I've got to roll up my sleeves on this tariff business. I have never seen in my life more people who have been more wrong about more things suddenly now coming out as experts on the latest Trump action, and I'm supposed to believe that they're right. This is the first time that they're right. People are even digging up old clips of George W. Bush to show just how wrong Trump's instincts are. And of course, if anybody's instincts were off, I think W is a leading contender. But so let's talk about this real fast. The list of countries across the world impacted by tariffs, the tariff rates, the discounted tariff rates, all of that yesterday held at a press conference right during the show here. So I wanted to listen to all of it and internalize all of it and not react to it too much in the moment because we already had a show prepped, and it's tricky to do two things at once here. Trust me, folks. So markets predicting or predictably reacting today with fear. This is what markets do. Markets do not like uncertainty. Wall Street wants to be able to predict what the next week, next month, next year looks like. Uncertainty always creates sell-off conditions in global markets. That doesn't mean that this is unsound policy. I have to, since when did we treat the stock market, the Dow Jones Industrial, for example, as somehow of an immediate, litmus test on whether a certain policy is sound or not? Now, you can certainly over time, if you're looking at, years going by, that there are other things that matter as well, tracking GDP, tracking inflation numbers. And a lot of these indicators for the past few years, folks, were not real. A lot of what is coming to pass right now is the markets are realizing that much of the math, much of the inputs that they were taking in about the state of the economy under Biden were fictitious. And the great reckoning now is coming. But the reckoning is going to be good. And there's lots of examples of this. And so the panic that you're seeing right now is I think to be expected. But it's necessary. I saw somewhere, well, listen, we're only 30% of the world trade, give or take. Countries can just trade around us, and other silly assessments here of how this is going to be absolutely terrible. It simply isn't the case. We are just a trading partner. We are the leader in the world in innovation. We are the leader in technology. China, by the way, catching up to us, no question about that. But we are a country that drives the global economy with or without a trade deficit. And one thing that is, I think, really important to understand as well is that, you're looking at these treasury yields. One of the things that Trump is absolutely trying to do here is make our debt, our national debt, cheaper and more sustainable long term. Right? We have trillions upon trillions of national debt, right? And these are treasury bonds, right? That are basically instruments, financial instruments by which we are paying, you and I as taxpayers are paying an interest rate on. And there's been a problem here because one of these, there's a group of funds, about $9 trillion, which represents approximately a third of our national debt, and it needs to be refinanced. And lower rates on these T-bills means we can refinance them. The first step of fixing the mess that Joe Biden and Janet Yellen left behind is to get these bonds refinanced in a way that allows the government to take a breath and start actually paying some of this debt back. So when you combine, and all of this is interconnected, right? What Doge is doing, these tariffs, deregulation, right? And an overall push to have foreign companies, instead of producing goods elsewhere on the cheap, investing in American factories, investing in the American economy, investing in domestic production in the US. All of that will be a net positive to everybody. And soon, and when I say soon, it could be a year, the market will reflect this. Stocks will be up. In fact, the stock market will boom in ways it has never before. And all the people out there right now who are hand-wringing over this, they sound like such idiots. And I'll give you examples, of course, as we get through this. So, these are the issues, right? We've got a trade deficit with people out there. And I love the example. Somebody was saying this, I'm trying to think who this was, said it's, the Trump's arguments are like saying, hey, if you go to IHOP and you go to IHOP all the time and buy pancakes, okay, but you make ceiling fans and you get mad that they're not buying your ceiling fans. This is how people understand the economy. Look, Apple makes the iPhone. What is an iPhone selling for now? Almost $1,500. $1,500. What is it costing Foxconn, which is one of the suppliers making the iPhone in China? What is it costing them to produce it? I mean, I have an actual question for you. What is it cost? $100, maybe 80, 70? What would happen if Apple had to produce a $1,500 iPhone in the United States of America, giving good paying technical jobs to American workers? Because this is what this is all about. Apple's profit, yes, per unit would go down. That is why Wall Street is freaking out. But what would happen next? American workers somewhere, probably not in California because California is a mess, but let's say somewhere like Nevada or Texas or even Florida or Alabama, their factory would be built. American workers would build the phone. The phone would cost maybe $500 to produce. Maybe would cost, Apple may sell it for, $50, $100 more. And in turn, every one of those workers gets a paycheck. That worker takes his paycheck home. He spends it. The paycheck that American worker, not the Foxconn slave working in China somewhere, but the American worker comes home, goes to the mall, pays his bills, and puts that money back into the American economy. That will result at scale in such an enormous boost to the economy that eventually whatever, Apple lost in profit and Wall Street punished us with over that loss in profit will be made up and will actually increase exponentially as all of these workers are funneling their paychecks back into the good old US of A. And anyone who doesn't acknowledge this simple thing and tries to give you complete nonsense, metaphors for how this is or isn't, is just completely missing the point and doesn't understand basic economics. We have tried to offshore our economy. We've done this now decade after decade after decade, and it just doesn't work. And in the long run, do we want to be a country that doesn't make anything? Even from a national security perspective, should we be dependent entirely on China for our tech? Should we be dependent on India to produce our drugs, prescription drugs, medicines, etc.? I don't think that's a good idea. This is what Trump is getting at. And by the way, this is a pro-worker, pro-middle class, pro-blue collar move. And when Trump is successful, the Democratic Party politically will never have a hope or a prayer to ever regain a single solitary working class vote in the United States of America. It will not happen. And this is precisely why these people are all screaming right now like stuck pigs, because they're hoping and praying that with enough drama, they can get Trump to back down. I, for one, hope he stands firm. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam & Ash Injury Law, 702-820-1234, because you deserve what's right.
I'm the best.
Personal injury law has been the same for a long time.
The best.
Big egos, greed, and sleazy schemes. We've had enough. Welcome to Sam & Ash, the new standard for personal injury law, where things are done the right way, because you deserve a team that delivers real support and results. When you have both, your whole world can change. Sam & Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
Hi, welcome back. Sam Mirejovsky here, host of the What's Right show, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian and all-around great guy. Here behind the What's Right microphone, my email, sam@whatsrightshow.com, sam@whatsrightshow.com. And then on X, formerly known as Twitter, you can find me there at What's Right Sam. By the way, What's Right Sam on Twitter, now very active overnight, getting into the Hey Reb controversy. Beloved mascot of UNLV, canceled by the woke mob in 2021. I touched on it yesterday, and then a clip of it started making the rounds late last night. Woke up this morning, I go, ooh boy. So I'll talk to you about that top of the hour here, next hour, as I want to get first to the subject of the tariffs. So tariffs, if they are done right, can be good. You've got to find the right number. And the point is, too, that the tariffs are intended to produce a result that helps the U.S. You know, it's a funny thing to me. I feel like, much like the USAID stuff, where we're just sending money over for no articulable reason. People that have been running this country for years can't actually tell you why they do things. For example, why is it okay that we were accepting Canada putting a 300% tax on Canadian butter, for example, and then not doing a reciprocal tariff anywhere close to it on, the Canadians put a 300% tariff on our butter and us not doing the same to theirs? Right? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. Because it has been the policy, I think, of the leadership of this country, the political leadership of this country for many years, to just let America take it, just take it, take our lumps and just keep moving on. So Trump, in his tariff announcement yesterday afternoon at the Rose Garden, said this. I think it's quite prescient given what has happened since.
In the coming days, there will be complaints from the globalists and the outsourcers and special interests and the fake news. Always, the fake news will always complain. But never forget, every prediction our opponents made about trade for the last 30 years has been proven totally wrong. They were wrong about NAFTA. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would have been a disaster if I didn't terminate it. If I didn't terminate that, United Auto Workers, you would have had no jobs in this country. You would have had no jobs. It was all going to other countries. In my first term, they said tariffs would crash the economy. Instead, we built the greatest economy in the history of the world. And again, I have great respect for President Xi of China, great respect for China, but they were taking tremendous advantage of us, and I commend them for that. I say, hey, if you can get away with it, that's okay. But, you know, they understand exactly what's happening, and they probably, most of them are saying it's about time they did something, but, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight fair. Everyone's going to fight. You know, it's like, I say to the leaders, look, you got to take care of your country, but we have to start taking care of our country now. We can't do what we've been doing for the last 50 years.
Bingo, because it isn't working. And it's, guess what? It's making the rich rich. Right? Everybody's complaining about the markets today. Can we talk about this? Can we talk about how arrogant it is? I don't like to say this, but I'm going to. You've got boomers sitting around going, oh, my stock portfolio. And the millennials and younger are going, I can't even buy a house. This economy isn't working for me. You know how absurd people sound? Well, there goes my European vacation. When there are folks in rural towns and small towns across America that have been ruined by factories closing because jobs got sent all around the world. It's not right. And all of a sudden, right, you've got a Republican president occupying this position, and it's goading even very reasonable Democrats to come out of the woodwork and scream how this is the dumbest financial decision ever. People are showing their true colors right now. That's the takeaway. Listen to Morning Joe Scarborough here, the program. They've got their analyst, financial guy looking at this. This is Stephen Ratner and Mika Brzezinski, wife of Joe, co-host of the program, asks Mr. Ratner to walk us through the problems. This is, by the way, they're never going to issue a correction on any of it when it proves untrue.
Can you walk us through the numbers? And is there any positive take on this?
Well, I can answer the second question first. I don't think there's a single positive take on this. This is all just bad. It's bad, as we talked about before, for inflation. It's bad for economic growth. It's bad for
inflation.
But let me put this a little bit in perspective. We talked about the stock market today and how bad a day it's going to have. This chart predates that, and it goes back really to the election. And I want to just show you, because Trump's got a bunch, as we also talked briefly about before, of other economic and challenges he's facing. And so the stock market, which is this red line, our stock market, we start out here. And he was doing pretty well after the election. There was this burst of Trump euphoria, as we saw in 2016 as well. But since Inauguration Day, it has basically been straight down for our stock market. And that is a combination of anticipation of these tariffs, but also just all the chaos and commotion down there, the cutting, the Doge, all this stuff, and the uncertainty has really scared the market. And that's actually in stark contrast. China, which has had a terrible run at its stock market, has actually done exceptionally well. And even Europe, which is certainly nothing to brag about on the economic front, has way outperformed us.
Wait, stop. He's showing a chart. He's showing a chart of the Chinese market. The Chinese market is all fugazi. It's like literally made up numbers. China's entire economy is smoke, meat, mirrors. And the European stock market is going down similarly to ours in the same trend line.
So Trump had a set of challenges already, as represented by the stock market before. And again, before yesterday, because we don't have updated numbers just yet, economists were taking down their projections for the economy for this year. So Goldman Sachs thinks that unemployment, which they thought was going to be 4%, they now think is going to be 4.5%.
Yeah.
And these numbers are going to get worse when
They're going to get worse. Yes, Goldman Sachs, the den of reasonableness, is coming out with these numbers. Watch them all be wrong. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Back right after this. Greetings and welcome to the What's Right Show, your place for common sense conservatism, Monday through Friday, 1 to 3 p.m., right here on News Talk 840 KXNT. Speaking of people that are always wrong, Jim Cramer. Okay, this guy, you know, CNBC, he's a stock guy, and he is so wrong so many times that there is this joke, you know, in the investor community. It's called the inverse Cramer rule. So if Jim Cramer says something's going to work or says a stock is going up, do exactly the opposite of what he says to do, and you will end up winning most of the time. Jim Cramer just said that a 20% tariff on any economy and any country that we trade with will be horrendous for the United States of America. So just remember the inverse Cramer rule or the inverse George W. Bush rule. Both apply in this situation. I played the clip from CNBC Morning Joe. They're all saying the GDP is going to go down. What's interesting is, you know, GDP, a lot of people don't understand this. It's an aggregate number and not an assessment of individuals in an economy. And if you look at the share of aggregate wealth of different socioeconomic groups, a very distressing story begins to unfold. From 1983 to 2016, aggregate wealth held by upper income families rose by 19%, from 60 to 79%. So meaning upper income families, defined at a steady number, at a steady threshold, right? Consistent, went from 60 to 79%. Share for middle income families dropped from, this is huge, 32% down to 17%. And share of GDP, again, as an aggregate number, for lower income families fell from 7% to 4%. Why am I telling you this? Because every single Democrat I know is screaming how bad this policy is because they hate Trump. If this was a Democrat president doing this, they would be saying exactly what I'm saying right now, and then some, okay? They would be supporting it lock, stock, and barrel because they understand, I got to think, some of these people who actually are knowledgeable on the economy appreciate the fact that we need to revitalize our middle class. We need to get back to where people can buy homes, afford to live, maybe even afford to live off of one income. Moms need to go back to being at home. I mean, I hate to say this, but economically, it needs to be a possibility because kids need their parents. And there is something really good about having a parent in the home. Hey, look, it doesn't have to be mom. It can be dad, but regardless, single income families, that is a pipe dream for people now. So I don't know. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills over here watching these people shouting and screaming about it. J.D. Vance, of course, made the right argument here. This is precisely the reasoning behind doing all of this. And I don't think anybody on the left is paying much
For
attention.
40 years, we've had an economy that rewards people who ship American jobs overseas and raises taxes on American workers, and we're flipping that on its head. We're going to cut taxes for American workers and for American companies that build here. We're going to make it harder to ship American jobs overseas. It's a total shift in the way that we've done economic policy in the United States of America, but it was necessary. So, yeah, we're going to cut your taxes. You're going to have more money in your pocket, and that's, of course, going to help you deal with the cost of inflation. But that's not about offsetting the tariffs. They work together. We want to penalize people for shipping our jobs overseas. We want to reward hardworking Americans. It's all part of the same policy.
How is any of this bad? Again, I understand it's going to be bad short term. I understand why, for example, our treasurer here in the state of Nevada is screaming about this because, of course, we have quite a lot of money invested in the markets, and this is not good for the financial returns of the state of Nevada. That's why he's upset. But long-term gains for American workers to boost the middle class is the only way that this country survives. By the way, you want to, people are probably thinking, Sam, what are you bringing, mom staying at home for? What are you doing that for? You're mixing an issue into this that doesn't belong. The answer is very much does belong. We have declining birth rates in the West. It is a big problem. We have a demographic cliff that we are about to go off of. And it's bad in the U.S. It is catastrophic in Europe. And it's actually bad in most places. I mean, the overlap, the Venn diagram overlap is very tight, almost precise, of places that have pursued globalism over national sovereignty and domestic production. It has made most of the country poorer, given obviously people who invest in the marketplace and whatnot do well. So the upper income earners do great. But the sacrifice, of course, is the middle class and the lower middle class and the lower classes. And it's not okay. So that's what we're up against. By the way, Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, went on CNN's, I think, Caitlin Collins show, and Caitlin Collins was just ready to skewer him, and in turn, I think he did a great job of fighting back. No, Pamela Brown, excuse me. I thought it was Caitlin Collins. Pamela Brown, CNN Today, this morning. Here's Howard Lutnick talking about basic math of how these tariffs work out.
Not counting the factories that are going to be built. President Trump yesterday announced $5 trillion in domestic commitments to build factories in America, right? Remember, domestic production, GDP. People forget, if you buy a Toyota that's made in Japan, that's not domestic production. Domestic production is factories built here. So you've got $5 trillion committed to be building factories in America, and that's going to drive growth. If you divide that by our $30 trillion economy, that's a whole lot of growth, and you're going to get that starting in the fourth quarter, and that's going to drive this U.S. economy because it's American workers who are going to build those factories.
And that's what it is. I think you're going to see the pain here over the course of the year, resulting at the end of the year some of the benefits that I'm describing, because of course these factories are not going to be built overnight, but these, a lot of Chinese companies thought they were being super sneaky, taking advantage of NAFTA and NAFTA's successor by building factories, maquiladoras, in Mexico. And Mexico was getting, the elites in Mexico were getting fabulously wealthy from all the Chinese influence, but the Mexican workers were actually doing very well because all this production was moving into Mexico. And it was certainly great politically for the Mexican government that encouraged this. There's a place right outside of Mexico City, called Santa Fe, I think, is the name of the enclave. Might be an independent city, but it's just, you drive through it, you think you're in a I mean, first world, absolutely stunning high-rise buildings, and every international company is there. From Porsche to Siemens, European companies, Chinese companies, everybody is there. And why? Is the Mexican market so great? No, it's a con. Okay, these folks are getting around existing tariff structures to get into a location that had a 0% tariff so they could get their products, services, and everything into the United States at 0%. And by the way, that's why Trump has to slap down Mexico. It has to happen. And without our marketplace, Mexico can't just replace us that easily. This is why the Canadians, yesterday, I played the clip, Doug Ford, Ontario Premier. He is saying, look, we'll take everything off. We'll take everything off. Okay, well, that's a change of tune that we did not hear for decades. I also do not find particularly persuasive this idea that, well, this criticism of Trump that he's crazy. I hate that. To Sam, he is insane. Here's the problem, folks. Sometimes in a negotiation, you have to convince the other side that you are insane, that you are crazy, that you are unreasonable in order for you to get what you want. If you doubt what I'm saying, ask yourself what it's like to negotiate with a crazy person. It's not easy. Okay? So now put yourself in the shoes of Vietnam. They agreed to reduce our tariff rates to 0. How much U.S. product do you think actually is going to get purchased by Vietnam? Vietnam has a, $500 billion economy? Total? A lot of that export driven? It's a serious question. How much do you think it's going to help us? Oh, yay, that Vietnam suddenly goes, oh, we're not going to tariff anything from made in the U.S. that comes into our country. Who has the advantage in this fight? Who has the advantage? We're actually right now we're getting exactly to the nub of the point here. So suddenly, because I saw a lot of very smart people I respect in the last couple days, as soon as Vietnam said 0, Israel said 0, right? I heard people say things like, well, we should just now show our goodwill and reciprocate. We should just reciprocate. Now, Israel is a special case. We'll set that one aside for a moment. Although this one argument applies to Israel and to Vietnam, and that is their market is tiny, ours is huge. Anything they make, they will want to sell to the U.S. because we are we'll call it a third of the world's purchase power. In your business, in your line of work, can you take a 33% pay cut starting now? No. That's devastating. How much sleep are we going to lose if Vietnam doesn't buy anything made in the U.S.? The short answer is not much. But what about the million jobs, maybe 700,000, 500,000 jobs in Vietnam that produce goods that exist solely for the U.S. market? What if half those jobs get moved here to the U.S.? What does that do for our economy over time? You see what this is about? It's not about evening things up and making them quote unquote fair on a percentage to percentage level. It's about looking at it saying it's not right. It is not appropriate for us to subsidize the economies of other places around the world at the expense of our middle class, of our lower class, of our working class, blue collar Americans. That's the issue. And this is why, people were criticizing the charts that Trump put up. put up these, and they go, oh my gosh, he's adding the trade deficit. He's putting the trade deficit numbers in it. It doesn't have to do with the with the actual percentages of the tariffs that they have versus what we have on our goods mutually. And I was like, yes, that's the point. The point isn't necessarily with Vietnam that we care that our goods are taxed at, or were taxed at 25% and now down to 0, because it's not a huge market for us. But what is damaging to us are these jobs that we don't have. And this is what, in the second part of his answer to Pamela Brown, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick got at. And this is the part that if there's nothing else from today's program that you get this, you've got to remember.
Why should U.S. policy basically suggest that you can find the cheapest labor in the world with the worst labor conditions in the whole wide world, the worst pollution, right? No environmental rules at all. Let's go build there because it's really cheap and we'll sell it to the great American economy. How about we build it here? We use robotics here. It's cheaper than cheap labor overseas. You're going to see something completely different. You're going to see the greatest economy in the world. The Renaissance will be the greatest factories in the world. High tech people. What are the jobs Americans are going to have? We are going to have mechanics who fix robotics. We're going to have engineers and electricians who work on these great high-tech factories. These are high-tech jobs. All you need is a high school education and training, and they're going to have great jobs, great paying, and this is who Donald Trump is going to build for.
Yes, exactly. Right? This is the point. And by the way, I got to take a break, but when we talk about universities, I'll tell you, what does this mean for schooling in the future, right? Schools. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Hint, it's going to be really bad for schools that are teaching kids how to be activists instead of how to be engineers. The What's Right show will be back in just a moment. Folks, let me explain the economy that Democrats and rhino Republicans want us to have. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. Sam at what'srightshow.com. And on X, you can find me at What's Right Sam. The economy the globalists want is one that has strictly an upper funnel of wealth going to the top echelon of our country. The economy that they want produces nothing, has people making money that is, I guess, it's not fictitious, but gains through the capital growth of companies that rely on labor that's outside of the country, that's not on American soil, and in turn makes middle and lower income America poorer. Batya Ungar-Sargon, who's, by the way, she's describes herself as a lefty MAGA person, had this to say this morning.
Let's be clear about what we're seeing right now. This market sell-off is Wall Street trying to short President Trump's agenda. They are betting against the American worker. It's utterly despicable. Instead of doing what President Trump is doing, which is saying we're going to invest heavily in our middle class. We are no longer going to be a country in which our economy is an upward funnel of wealth from the hardest working Americans into the pockets of the international global elites. Wall Street is trying to control the president's agenda with this totally anti-American sell-off. And I think it's unbelievable that the president is not caving and that he is standing strong with the agenda that he promised the American people. This is what he was given a mandate to do. And it is so exciting to see somebody actually make good on the promises they made to the American people.
But Wall Street is doing this deliberately because they want cheap labor. They want slave labor in China. I mean, I'm just going to come out and say it. Wall Street, if you're Goldman Sachs, you think you give a rip about child labor around somewhere in China, if the per unit cost of a stock that you're invested in, of a company whose stock you're invested in, goes down, the profitability of it goes up, because instead of having, you know, a $200 or a $50 per item cost, you're driving it down to 35, 25. These people, I'm telling you, these Wall Street people would sell their own grandmothers for a buck. And I'm not a communist. I'm all for people making money. I'm just telling you that without a healthy middle class, we're not going to cut it. And all you hear from the Democrats year over year, election cycle to election cycle, is stupid, idle talk about how they're going to save the middle class. And then they turn around and sell out to Goldman Sachs over and over again. What I'm saying here is the God's honest truth. So yeah, I'm going to talk about universities and what this does to them. I'm also going to talk about Hey Reb. I tell you, this here, for those of you who are not in Nevada, this is the whole thing, all the mascots that got canceled, all the wokeism that is now dead. It's time we bring the mascots back. It's important to make mascots great again. Stay tuned. More What's Right show with me, Sam Mirejovsky, up next. Greetings, friends, and welcome to the What's Right show. Yes, I am here, Sam Mirejovsky, Nevada's favorite recovering Californian, behind the What's Right microphone. Now, I came to Nevada 2019, right before the pandemic, and was here living through the pandemic, the summer of George, and witnessed an event up close and personal that bugged me. Now, that's the way to put it. I mean, it just really bothered me that UNLV canceled this mascot that they'd had for several decades over the accusation, completely erroneous, that this mascot had something to do with the Confederacy. Now, I'm talking about Hey Reb, and I touched on this yesterday. A brief clip of it sort of went viral. I mean, it got the attention of a few people, and it started a discussion. Now, I didn't get into this too much yesterday, but a couple of things I just have to get off my chest here. This is a completely, and I mean a completely made up controversy. Hey Reb was a mascot that was designed, okay, to replace Beauregard the Wolf, right? He was this Confederate soldier, and it was a play, a tongue-in-cheek play, Beauregard was, on the fact that what? UNLV here in Southern Nevada, in Las Vegas, that they were the rebels, and they call themselves the rebels. They still are the rebels. They're not Southern rebels. They're the rebels of the North in Nevada, because the UNR is the founding University of Nevada school. And we down here at UNLV broke off from them, right? And in 1983, I think that was the year, 1983, there's some concern that, having an actual Confederate soldier, wolf-looking guy in a uniform, that, that this was somehow, a problem. And so what they did, they created a new mascot, okay? And out went the cartoon wolf, and in came, okay, the new guy, Hey Reb. Mike Miller created him. And it's, based on a rugged Western trailblazer exploring Nevada. And Miller sold the design for $1. It was really kind of a for the public, for the school, for the love of Southern Nevada. There it was. Now, there was a push all the way back in 2015 by Harry Reid. May he rest in peace. to rename the school that it was, one of remaining Confederate symbols, and they're, complete nonsense. It prompted, by the way, in the wake of Harry Reid calling for this, I guess some sort of well, not a survey. It was an investigation by the school, and there was a 60-page report by the chief diversity officer. Can you imagine who the chief diversity officer is for a public university? It's like a, chief communist, basically. And in the report, in that very report, it says that there's no basis of fact, right, of this Hey Reb guy being mascot being in any way related to the Confederacy. The Review Journal itself said that neither UNLV Rebels nickname nor its mascot have any ties to the Confederacy. End of the story. Then I think they had a survey, about 4,600 respondents. But 85 said it wasn't offensive. 6% said very offensive, 5% somewhat offensive, 4% slightly offensive. And so 15% people, because they were offended, right? The school decided to take, Hey Reb down, and they really haven't replaced him. They're just calling the Rebels, right? I don't even know it doesn't even matter what the mascot is. The mascot ought to be Hey Reb. Now, here's the argument. The debate on Twitter, if you missed it last night, the debate on Twitter is this. Sam, because some people are offended by this, we ought to be sensitive to those people who are offended and just move on. Because any link to the Confederacy, any link to institutionalized racism is bad. And, the offense is in the eye of the beholder, right? The offense, if somebody feels offense, and that is enough for me, and it ought to be enough for you, Sam. The Hey Reb issue is bigger than Hey Reb. The Hey Reb issue is about the fact that we cannot be governed by a small minority of insane fools. If we do that, everything's lost. This has always been the problem, and this is why I'm talking about the universities a lot right now. I think it's such an important issue for us to consider, because higher ed is failing us. But higher ed also is a reflection of our society, and this is, why we're fighting. Let me back up. The election last year, the 2024 presidential election, was, I think, among other things, a national referendum on wokeism. Trump ran on, I would say, a decidedly unwoke agenda, or an anti-woke agenda even. He openly spoke about, in his various campaign remarks, about perhaps bringing back, even Confederate statues, our history, getting back to it, the criticisms and efforts to erase the many great things that our founding fathers have done. And in talking about this, and of course, the gender issues and all that, and talking about this, look, Trump became more and more popular because he was willing to voice these problems. Well, we all know how the election turned out. We know how people think about this. Most people, again, you want to talk about a 20-80 issue. This is an 85-15% issue when it comes to Hey Reb. But it is about the fact that there are still a lot of people out there, greater than the 15%, who think we ought to be listening to the 15%, that it is the virtuous thing to do. And this mentality is a cancer on the West. This is spreading through not just the U.S., but Europe. And it's catering to shrill, small groups of people. And this is why, right? This is why we actually are a democracy. We don't deal with things based on, satisfying every single person. It's 50% plus one. And 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 you can't rewrite the rules. It's interesting that the people that talk about democracy the most think that actually we ought to have a tyranny of the minority. And you see it right now in the news. You hear a lot of Democrats who have lost the presidency, lost the Senate, lost the House, and talking as though their opinions matter and have broad support among, the public. I saw Scott Jennings last night eviscerate this, liberal lady, and he's, she's yelling at him about what Trump is running. He was like, hey, listen, where's Trump's polling? 50-50? Where's Democrats polling in Congress? 20-80? Like, shut up, literally. Trump won a national election. You guys can't find your way out of an open brown paper bag, politically speaking. This is the most important thing. And by the way, somebody wrote me and said, unfortunately, Sam, I don't think that woke is dead. And I'm telling you, woke is dead if we say it's dead. We don't have to listen to the 15% out there that think that just because they imagine something is offensive, it is. You being offended, not speaking to you guys get this, but someone out there thinking that they're offended, that's a them problem. That's not a me problem. That's not a you problem. That's a them problem. If you can't control your emotions, what the hell's wrong with you? And we certainly should not govern ourselves as individuals or as a society out of, in careful deference to the delicate sensibilities of these, soy-soaked people out there wandering among us. That, I think, is an absolute fool's errand. And that's how it's been. We've allowed the woke mob to get together to scream and to shout, and we, the silent majority, didn't say anything. Because in the wake of George Floyd and everything, we were terrified. And why were we terrified? By the way, because they were literally going around burning our cities to the ground, threatening major violence, inflicting violence in some cases, even death. And the police, a lot of them were taking a knee. So I understand why people were afraid. But now's the time to reclaim lost ground. And I intend to use this microphone, this platform of the show to fight for this. And I'm not going to lay off this Hey Reb issue anytime soon. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840, KXNT. The What's Right show is brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam and Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right.
The Sam and Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
Yeah, you know what? I'll tell you something, folks. I am done with pussies. Yes, that's how I'm going to put it. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. By the way, that word comes from pusillanimous. And I'll let you look that up so you know that it is not a reference to a female body part. Welcome to the What's Right show, brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. I'm going to say one more thing here about Hey Reb. The mascot that we will bring back here in Southern Nevada to UNLV, Hey Reb, belongs back on campus, and we will not let up until the administration changes their minds. I saw this guy quoted in the Review Journal back when this all was going down. This is a story originally from 2016. Okay, here we go. So what's this guy? I got it right here in my stack. Ah, yes. Juan Cuellar, a UNLV education graduate student, said the name change was, quote, long overdue and necessary for students of color. To be reminded on a daily basis is problematic The name change doesn't mean racism is going away and everything will be peaches and cream, but it's an important step, close quote. An education graduate student, Mr. Cuellar, is probably teaching your kid somewhere in some public school in this country. God help us all. Mr. Cuellar is stupid. He also is willing to be quoted in a public newspaper for having his emotions get the best of him. You know, those of you out there who are adults and emotionally sound, can I ask you something? Is it ever a good idea to let anybody know that something bothers you? I mean, if you have to think about that, let me clue you in. The answer is no. It's like literally never a good idea to make to let anybody know that something irritates you. But for some reason, the woke left has made an entire system of government around this. Doesn't matter what the law is. It doesn't matter what the history is. It doesn't matter what the facts are. Some guy named Juan Cuellar is pissed off and is hurt. His feelings are hurt. And because Mr. Cuellar, can't keep his emotions in check, the university, everybody's supposed to dance to his tune. When they did the survey back in 2016, again, only 15% of their respondents, 4,600 students, people in the community, only 15% found it offensive. Can I say, by comparison, 13% of Americans think that Bigfoot is real. So roughly the same amount of people that think Bigfoot is real think that this Hey Reb mascot was offensive. How does it feel, right? That's can you imagine? Based on this logic, it would be dispositive proof that Bigfoot in fact is real because 13% of Americans say that it's so. We cannot be governed by a shrill minority of morons. How's that for consonants? You can't do it. You start to, and this is the problem with leftism. Imagine that Trump is going to be successful with his economy. Imagine that we get the economy to the place described by Howard Lutnick, where we are investing in manufacturing, high-tech jobs, technical jobs once again. And instead of churning out these loser, lobotomized idiots out of our colleges, we actually have now a demand in the marketplace for people with technical know-how. When we talk about what's going to be happening in universities across the country, and we talk about the demographic, cliff for new students and the headwind of having, the loss of a compliant federal administration, through whose largesse, of course, via student loans and grants, many of these institutions are even able to survive. We talk about all that, but imagine when you can't just send people out into the world with a BS degree. I don't mean a bachelor's of science. I mean a bull degree. Sociology. Sociology. By the way, I had to get out of college fast. I have a sociology degree. I used it just to get into law school, okay? I think it's in I don't even remember. Point is, I asked, how do I get quickest out of school right now? I'm here, point A, I need to get to point B. What's my quickest way out? I got to get to law school. And I was 29 years old. I was already a college dropout. I already had a bunch of units at UCI and went to Chapman. I said, just get me out of here. Quickest way. So I think it was a sociology degree. Straight A's though, 4.0, and got into law school, and the rest is history. But regardless, but the students go there and they take these gender studies. How valuable do you think gender studies is going to be in a Trump economy that is finally driven again by manufacturing, output production, and not BS? I think these people are going to be completely screwed, but not nearly as screwed as the institutions that relied on these types of degrees to pad their annual, P&Ls. There is a revolution happening now. When Trump called the tariff thing Liberation Day, I mean, the schools, again, our universities will have to go back to providing a valuable good and service that is not subsidized by the U.S. government. And the valuable good and service will be measured in the kind of economic output individuals have leaving, their schools. This is why, even before Trump came to office, I'm telling my kid, I know you want to go to college to play a sport, and if there's a purpose why you want to go to college, for example, to become an attorney, to be a doctor, you've got to go through a 4-year school in order to get to grad school. I got it. Play a sport. I got it. But if my kid didn't play a sport, if he didn't know what he wanted to do, under no circumstances would I tell him to go to college. I tell him, get a job somewhere, start learning the ropes, learn a trade, learn to work with your hands, develop technical skills. You will be at the cutting edge of the economy of the future. And everybody else that's learning, how many different genders there are is going to be completely effed. What's Right show brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. Back right after this. All right, friends, welcome back. The What's Right show is on, brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law, 702-820-1234, because you deserve what's right. There's a funny piece in ProPublica about immigration enforcement. And it's a big, long story about the flight attendants that work for a charter airline that is supposedly flying, I guess, I'm taking this at its face value. The airline's one of the contract airlines that ferries deportees out of the country. You know what, Robbie, the funniest part about this to me was, because of course I know a thing or two about aviation and about, airlines. I follow this stuff closely. The flight attendants were on the record as saying that they were hired on. They expected to be flying VIPs to glamorous locations. VIPs to glamorous. Did these flight attendants, Robbie, I have a question. Did they ask what kind of airplanes this Global Crossing Airlines group operated? These are the airlines, charter airlines that are used to ferry people in bulk, like on cheap junkets. It's like where you've got a discount travel agency gets a deal where they charter the airline, divide the cost up among 150 seats, and they go to Cabo, and it's an all-inclusive deal. And it's right. This Global X is one of the companies. There's Global Crossing, right? Well, yeah, the A320s. The point is, right, these deportees are being sent back on an airline that is configured with a bunch of coach seats, very basic seats. They're not being ferried on private jets that look like Air Force One with leather seats, and it's not like that. And so it already starts to me very suspicious. Like, oh, we thought we were going to be flying people, VIPs at exotic destinations. But this is not how VIPs travel. You people are idiots. But the attendants are complaining now, and part of this piece, and it's part of all the propaganda against deportation, against the Trump administration that's out there. And they're just saying that they spoke to 7 current and former airline crew members. and that their accounts were consistent with one another, and that they were just shocked by some of the rules. So here's the things that they felt shocking. The flight attendants were told to not talk to the detainees. Well, that's pretty shocking, Robbie, right? Don't feed them. Okay. Don't make eye contact. Can't do this seriously. Don't walk down the aisles without a guard escorting. Yeah, because they're gang members. You, don't sit in aisle seats where detainees could get close to you. Apparently, they were shocked to see that these people were both shackled at the wrists and at the ankles. I have a question for you. So far, have you heard anything here that is like revolutionary or that surprises you? Should we be sending the deportables out of this country on like first class tickets? Like, I'm just asking, what's the story here? I mean, they're lucky they're getting flown. I mean, if Mexico was cooperating, so we'd put these people on buses and just and ship them by ground. I mean, this is insane. You and I are paying for this, right? At no place in this story is there. Boy, doesn't it stink that American taxpayers have to foot the bill for criminal illegal aliens being returned to sender. Boggles the mind. This to me is, it's only a matter of time before a deportation flight ends in disaster. You know, where was mainstream media with that phrase? It's only a matter of time before Biden's open border kills another person. Where was mainstream media to write, it's only a matter of time before someone you know is murdered by a criminal illegal alien? It's only a matter of time before someone you know dies of fentanyl poisoning because of a wide open southern border. They were silent for 4 years. How dare them now condescend us with this type of absolute garbage reporting? I'm upset. The New York Post did a piece today. This was fascinating. MS-13 gangbangers with links to 11 alleged murders. Trump says, get out. Biden says, please stay. Tuesday, the FBI apprehended Joel Vargas Escobar, an illegal El Salvadorian immigrant and alleged MS-13 gang member. He is allegedly involved in hardcore crimes with links to 11 murders and accusations that he ordered 2 of those killings. It goes through it, and it talks about Joe Biden's policy. And kudos to the New York Post for writing this. And by the way, the New York Post, a rare example of a publication that was consistent on the subject of the open border and was critical of it during the last administration, calling President Joe Biden's wave them in policy, which included a willful failure to meaningfully enforce any rules against people after they jumped the border, saying it was always going to be a disaster. I think this Vargas guy actually was apprehended here in Las Vegas. That's how I remember it, Robbie. I think this is the guy, right? And I think this guy was living in our midst. They absolutely apprehended an MS-13 gang member here in Las Vegas. I just don't know if it was exactly the same guy. But this is it. And Laken Riley died for this, okay? As did other Americans. Literally, people died because of Joe Biden's policies. And now the media, the mainstream media, wants to be like, oh, someone's going to die on one of these deportation flights. Oh, yeah? Well, maybe you shouldn't have supported and voted for a political party and president who made it easy for these criminals who, by your own admission, are unsafe. You've talked to your 7 flight attendants. Oh, I don't feel safe on this deportation flight when they're shackled. Well, you know what? Laken Riley didn't feel safe jogging near her home, did she? Certainly wasn't safe. So please, those of you who supported this political party, this president, Joe Biden, his enablers in Congress and in the media, spare me now your exhortations that we need to be concerned about the safety of these flight attendants doing deportation flights. Something could go wrong when you were perfectly fine with releasing these madmen into our communities. I don't want the FCC to shut me down, but F you. How upset are you about this? I know I am. The entire Contra debate on illegal immigration is a scam. Everything that the Democratic Party talks about, all their positions, oh, but habeas corpus, oh, but due process, nobody cared. They broke every law, meaning the government did, the past administration. They legalized with the stroke of a pen people they didn't follow any rules, any procedures. They shackled. You want to talk about who was shackled in the last administration? It was the Border Patrol. It was ICE. The MS-13 guy, Robbie reports, was Las Vegas based, but he was caught in Long Island. And he was on the run. He was also responsible for murders there. So that's great. So I was right. This guy was living in our community. Again, they let these people in. They let them in among us. They put them near our families, our neighbors, our friends. This country was getting invaded, and now Trump wants to do something about it. And all the Democrats can do is run to their loser liberal left-wing justices and go, And the judges act as if they themselves were elected by half the country to fix things and make them right. Judge Boasberg today, the judge gone wild in D.C., is threatening criminal contempt against the Trump administration. Yeah, you know what he can do? He can eat a bag of DIC you-know-whats. I hope he enjoys them. Literally, somebody ought to do that. Just send him a bag of gummy penises. Judge Boasberg, he does not have anything that he can do to threaten the Trump administration. He cannot even take a Trump lawyer into federal custody without the president immediately ordering that person freed. Because guess who the prisons and the jails report to? You heard me right. The President of the United States. Judge Boasberg is a paper tiger. Every one of these judges is a nothing at the end of the day because they don't follow legitimate rule of law. And the Democrats who are now pretending to be constitutionally scrupulous, well, I'm sorry, I have nothing but contempt for you. I really do. They disgust me. You let murderers in our midst. You let drug dealers invade this country. You let rapists prey on our wives, girlfriends, and daughters. These people don't deserve anything but contempt. Truly, they don't. ProPublica. Oh, the flight attendants are scared because these people are dangerous. They're shackled. I think they're a bit more dangerous lurking in my backyard, here in Las Vegas when they weren't in chains. Just a thought. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The What's Right show will be back in a moment. All right, friends, here we go. Sam Mirejovsky, News Talk 840 KXNT. The new email, sam@whatsrightshow.com. Glad to see some of my regulars discovering that and emailing me. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it deeply. The What's Right Show is brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law. In a crash, call Sam and Ash 702-820-1234 because you deserve what's right. Yes, excellent. Emails are coming in. This is great. I have to check them. Sorry, folks, got to check them. I think after the show today. A lot going on here all at once. I have one more point to make about immigration. It's a very important one. We cannot forget that at least 382 individuals, according to the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol statistics from 2021 to 2024, at least 382 people on the terror watch list were encountered attempting to cross into the southwest border illegally. Now, remember, enforcement was down. The Border Patrol was, well, let me just put it this way. They were strongly discouraged from performing their duties, and the Biden administration actually went as far as to sue the state of Texas for their own efforts to secure the border. So not only was the Biden administration, not doing enough from its own end, it was actively obstructing using liberal left-wing justices to stop Texas from securing its own state. We encountered 382 terrorists in 3 years. How many terrorists got into the country? This is the question, right? That weren't encountered. And by the way, of those 382 people, at least 99 of them Biden released into the country. Special interest aliens, SIAs, are non-U.S. persons flagged for suspicious travel patterns, like going back and forth to Afghanistan, for example, or between Afghanistan and Iran and back to Afghanistan and then to the U.S., okay? Patterns that may pose a national security risk. These are people that are not necessarily on the watch list, but of this, we discovered in 2024 that 1.7 million SIAs crossed into the U.S. illegally during the Biden administration. All it takes is one person, and we could have a mass casualty event. I'm going to let that sink in. What if one of these people detonates a bomb in Times Square? We can never forgive Joe Biden and honestly, the little puppeteers running him, what they did to this country. I still believe so strongly that, and I hope it doesn't happen, but I can't I have a terrible feeling that there are sleeper cells in this country that will do us harm. And by the way, should these people be summarily deported out of the country? Put on one of these terrible, uncomfortable, sad, non-VIP charter planes where the flight attendants don't even look them in the eyes and be sent the hell away from here? Who do we care more about? Do we care more about Americans being safe in our homes, in our cities, on our way to work, enjoying the weekend with our families? Or are we more concerned with the well-being of these terrorists that are in our midst, that Biden let in? These judges that are throwing up these roadblocks, they're going to be responsible for this. Everybody throwing up roadblocks. Every one of these insane Democrats, media idiots, will have already do have blood on their hands, and it's only going to get worse. And none of these people, by the way, cared about the comfort of the, I guess, millions of people that crossed through the Darien Gap at the border who faced sexual exploitation, rape, abuse, just because Biden, hung out the welcome sign. The human cost of this was enormous. And by the way, this brings up, I've had this here now for a while, but Elon Musk on Sunday at the rally in Wisconsin said this about the human cost of migration.
The truly disturbing thing to me, and the darkest thing about this to me,
so it's Garcias.
But the human tragedy this created is extraordinary, because what you don't understand, and people don't know, and Americans need to know, that's why I'm here, is that human traffickers made $13 to $15 billion off of this. Okay? That's the money that's going around the world, moving people around the world to our borders because of these incentives. How does it work? What happens? Hey, if you're in Africa and you're in Central America, you got to walk up through Mexico, through Central America. Who do you pay? You pay the narcos, you pay the traffickers, right? And we were told by ICE, it's between $20,000 and $500, depends where they pick you up, to walk across all those countries and get all the way up to the border. Where's that money goes? It goes to the cartels. It goes to human traffickers, right? There are 30,000 children that have not appeared on the notice to appear already. ICE knows this. 30,000 children, 270,000 children didn't even get notices to appear. ICE told us that kids are being trafficked back and forth across the border to complete families to make this easier. This is a human tragedy. It's not just the money, it's the people and the kids. And how many of these people died on the way up here that didn't make it in? What happened to them? We created a system here that created an incentive for people to come and be taken advantage of by these traffickers. And
this is absolutely right. Everything he's saying is correct. And for some reason, the Democrats think they're on the right side of this humanitarian equation. None of this can be further from the truth. All right, folks, tomorrow's Friday. I'll be back here at 1 o'clock. I'll see you then.